Children, calm down. Calm down.
We all back up one step.
Thank you, Ted.
Yep, go ahead.
Not easy to get out of this thing.
Good to see you, son.
Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Good to be back.
Get you to stand up on the step deck if you want.
All right, where's the mic stand? Over here. This has that one.
Yeah. No, you're good. Do your thing. I'll stand beside you. Right.
Okay, guys, get back in your spots. Give them some room, please.
Mike. Well, I spent the morning with the People's Convoy. We started in Hagerstown, Maryland. Spoke to the group there. They're gathered. They came from all over the country. Started in California, came across the country. And they came standing up and speaking for freedom. They came standing up speaking for the right each of us has to make our own health care decisions about our own body, to decide what you put into your body and what you don't put into your body. That's a fundamental right. It is amazing, as we drove in the convoy, all along the road, you saw men and women gathered waving flags, honking and expressing support. As we drove under overpasses, one after the other, the entire way, virtually every overpass we drove under, had crowds gathered waving flags saying thank you to the truckers. And let me tell you, these truckers, they are speaking out for the rights of every American. They're speaking out for the 3.5 million truckers across the United States. But it's not just truckers. They're speaking out for cops and firefighters. They're speaking out for soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines. They're speaking out for doctors and nurses and teachers. They're speaking out for airline pilots and flight attendants, all the people who have been ordered unjustly and illegally to take the COVID vaccine or be fired. Government has no right to do that.
That's right.
If you make the choice to take the COVID vaccine, God bless you. That's your right, and you have every right to do that. But if you make the choice not to take the vaccine, that is also your right. And every damn politician who gave speeches calling these guys heroes, and the officers, and our military, and our doctors, and our first responders heroes, why are they so quick to demand that those same men and women be fired if they don't comply with these dictates? It's fundamentally wrong. And I think all across this country, people know that it's wrong. And so I'm proud to listen to these guys, to hear their passion, to hear why they're here, why they're fighting. And I'm proud to stand with them. Happy to answer any questions.
We're proud of you too, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, God bless you for standing for our children as well.
How does this movement move forward at a congressional level?
Well, listen, 2 weeks ago, we forced a vote in the Senate on 2 different amendments. One that Mike Lee and I introduced together that would end all of the Biden vaccine mandates. It would end the mandates for active duty military. It would end the mandates for federal civilian employees. It would end the mandates for federal contractors, and it would end the private sector mandates through OSHA that the Supreme Court struck down. We had the vote on the Senate floor, we forced that vote, and then I had a separate amendment that we also forced a vote on that would cut off all federal funds to any government entity that imposes a mandate on kids. If anything is worse than forcing adults to take this vaccine against their wishes, it's forcing kids to do so. Kids as young as 5 years old across this country are being forced to comply with this mandate, and that's not right. It ought to be up to the parents to make the decision about health care for their own kids. So we forced both of those votes 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry to say the Democrats didn't have the votes, and if Republicans had shown up, we would have won. But 4 Republican senators were nowhere to be found and didn't vote.
What's your message?
And that's the only reason it didn't pass then. I can tell you, I'm fighting to vote on it again.
Good.
And I'm continuing to fight to end these mandates. These mandates are wrong. And you know, it's stunning that you don't have Democrats willing to stand up and say enough is enough. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. This should be leave me the hell alone. And you know, it was striking last week. Behind us, I sat on the floor of the House and listened to Joe Biden's State of the Union address. 535 members of Congress, there weren't 5 of them wearing masks in the entire thing. This is theater from politicians who are playing games. And people are tired of the games.
What's your message?
Senator Cruz, will the people who have lost their jobs be getting their jobs back?
They certainly should. Listen, everyone who has been fired over a vaccine mandate, they should have their jobs back. But for that to change, it's going to take the law change. You know, I'll tell you, as I travel the country, I talk to people all the time who've lost their jobs or who are at risk of losing their jobs. I've talked with Navy SEALs who spent a decade or more training and defending this nation, who are being told they're going to be fired if they don't comply with this. And so, you know, I was sharing with the guys driving, sometimes people on Twitter say, well, if you really hate it, just make it stop. You know, unfortunately, I don't have magic powers. The way you make it stop is through the operation of law and the operation of government, and there are consequences to who you elect to office. And right now, we have a president who's not listening to the truckers, not listening to the cops and firefighters and the working men and women of this country, who's willing to just arbitrarily say fire them. That's wrong. And what I can promise you is I'm going to keep fighting to defend their rights and the rights of every American. Yeah.
Senator Cruz, Tony Dukart with Newsmax. In addition to what you're doing already, what more are you willing to do to help the convoy, particularly with demands to investigate the origins of the pandemic and also looking into state and federal COVID responses?
Yeah, look, both of those I think are incredibly important. You look at the origins of the pandemic. The virus, God bless you. The virus, the evidence is overwhelming, I think escaped from a Chinese government lab in Wuhan, China. That evidence was compelling over a year ago. And for a year, the corporate media silenced that. We now have email exchanges with Dr. Fauci and Mark Zuckerberg where big tech agreed to suppress evidence that the virus came from a Chinese government lab. And big tech was more than happy to silence the citizenry. I can tell you, I do a podcast every week called Verdict with Ted Cruz. We had multiple podcasts walking through the evidence that for whatever reason they didn't silence the podcast, laying out the evidence early on that this virus escaped from a Chinese government lab. We know the Chinese government actively suppressed information about the pandemic. They disappeared whistleblowers. They disappeared physicians trying to stop the pandemic. And I think the evidence is growing that it didn't just escape from a Chinese lab, but that it was in fact constructed, manufactured in that Chinese lab through gain-of-function research. That evidence is not proven yet, but there's significant evidence. If Congress was doing its job, we'd have hearings. And the problem is the Democrats who hold the gavels don't want to have hearings. They don't want to know where COVID came from. They don't want to know how it escaped from the Chinese labs. They don't want to know if the virus was altered to make it more contagious or more dangerous. And so the Democrats' approach is to cover it up and hide it up. Well, I think a reckoning is coming. I believe in November we're going to see a red tidal wave. And if we see Republican control of Congress next year, I very much hope, and I'm going to do everything I can to make it happen, that we will have hearings on the origins of this pandemic and do everything we can to find out the truth about what happened.
Senator Cruz?
Yeah.
Given that the OSHA mandate for private businesses has already been struck down by the Supreme Court, what is your position on private businesses that impose vaccine mandates? Is it your position that, these are private entities, that's their prerogative, or would you support, if not, legislation to prevent that?
So, I don't think private businesses should impose vaccine mandates either. I think it's wrong. And I've introduced legislation to prohibit vaccine mandates. Current law does not prohibit it. I think it should be protected under the civil rights law, protected just like the Americans with Disabilities Act protects medical conditions so that your employer can't fire you because you have a medical condition. That same principle, I think, should apply to your choice whether or not to get the COVID vaccine. I've introduced that legislation. Right now, the Democrats who have the majorities in Congress don't want to move on it. And so, yes, I think we should change the law to protect people's rights and protect against vaccine discrimination.
Senator, why are Americans
Just for masks or to all vaccinations?
Sorry?
Just to COVID vaccinations or all vaccinations?
COVID vaccinations. Look,
Cruz, last year you tweeted out that we should end mask mandates for fully vaccinated people on the airplanes. Do you still feel that way now, or do you think it should be ended for all people, regardless of get the vaccine or not?
look, we should end mask mandates across the board. And I've actually introduced legislation to end mask mandates across the board. We should have no mask mandates. We should have no vaccine mandates. We should have no vaccine passports. It is insane that you have the left and the corporate media, they tell you it's wrong to ask for an ID to vote. That voter ID is a horrible racist idea, which is nonsense. But at the same time, they demand, show me your papers to buy a cheeseburger. That's idiotic. It is none of their damn business. And these mask mandates on planes are, at this point, are absurd. I mean, nobody actually thinks the logic. So right now the rule is you got to wear a mask unless you have a drink. And a Diet Coke magically cures COVID, apparently. If you have a peanut, no danger. Peanut in the hand, it's not contagious. Put the peanut down, oh my God, you're going to kill everyone. Like nobody, you walk into a restaurant where they had vaccine mandates. If you're walking, you had to wear a mask. As soon as you sit down, no mask. I don't know if it's, I've wondered, is there a scientific basis? Maybe it's altitude. That the virus at 6 feet high is deadly, and at 3 feet high, it's perfectly safe.
Senator, do you believe the vaccine has saved lives?
Look, I hope so. I'm not a doctor. You know what? Why would you take medical advice from me? I wouldn't take medical advice from me. I'm not in the business of giving medical advice. Go talk to your physician if you want to figure out whether you should take the vaccine or not. I hope we have good doctors and good scientists that are figuring that out, and I'm sure we're going to be debating and looking at the effects. But I hope so. Listen, I'm personally vaccinated. I made that choice. You can make that choice if you want. You can make a different choice if you want to. That's what freedom is all about.
That's right.
Senator Cruz, one of the big issues that the truckers are demanding, which the science shows, Omicron offers the exit strategy for the society now. It's not just about the mandates. It's about removal of the underlying emergency declarations. What is your position on that?
Look, of course we should end the emergency declaration. I voted for it. A majority voted for it in the Senate. It's not clear to me that the House of Representatives is even going to allow a vote on it. And Joe Biden has said he would veto it. And listen, what we've seen, in a time of crisis, people's character is revealed. And we've seen the excuse of a COVID emergency used to justify the abuse of power from petty tyrants politicians, look, I think we will look back in history at the shutdowns we had across this country, at the millions of small businesses that were shut down, at the schools that were shut down as one of the greatest moments of collective idiocy this country has ever had. We destroyed people's livelihoods. We destroyed family businesses, restaurants that have been in families for 2 and 3 generations. Politicians just with the flick of their hand destroyed. And what we did to kids and are still doing to kids is absolutely immoral. We were told 10 days to slow the spread, and that was an absolute crock. It was a lie. And you look at kids who in many parts of the country spent a year or longer not going to school in person. Listen, when schools were shut down, our girls are 11 and 13. So when schools were shut down and we did remote learning, Heidi and I were both at home with our girls. I was with one of them, Heidi was with the other. It was hard for 2 parents to make it through and get kids to pay attention to the stupid computer, to the online classes. That was hard, and we had the ability to both be there and assist with it. I don't know how a single mom who's struggling to pay the bills, who has 3, 4 kids, I don't know how she survived. And sadly, the answer is, for a lot of kids, particularly low-income kids that didn't have resources for help, it just meant they didn't go to school. They didn't go to school for weeks and then months, and then in some instances in excess of a year. And the data show those kids will be behind academically the rest of their lives. And that doesn't even factor, on top of that, the mental health problems, the drug and alcohol issues, the increased suicide rates we've seen. These policies are cruel and they're immoral. And I think it is time to end them all and let people live their lives.
Senator Cruz, what's your message to the 4 Republican senators who did not show up to the vote?
Do your damn job.
Yeah. Senator, where are your Senate colleagues? I know the truckers appreciate you being here, I'm sure, but I'm just wondering, you're one senator, there are several of you. Why are there not more senators joining you and taking a ride around the Beltway?
Well, look, I hope that they do. Earlier this week, Ron Johnson and I both met with the leaders of the People's Convoy. They invited us to come out. I was happy to take them up on their invitation, and I hope we see lots of senators. Hope we see lots of House members. It'd be nice to see a Democrat. Is there a Democrat in that entire building who cares about individual freedom, who cares about your right? You know, your body, your choice. The left has been a big fan of that phrase for a long time, but apparently on this issue, it's never mind. It's not your body. It's not your choice, is what they're saying. I think that's absurd. And so, listen, there are other senators, there are certainly other Republicans who care about this issue. I wouldn't be surprised to see others coming out and standing with the truckers. I decided today, I said, look, I want to come out and hear them firsthand, listen to what they're saying, and then lend my voice. One of the frustrations they've expressed, they've been circling the city. The outpouring of support's been incredible. But one of the frustrations these guys have expressed is that much of the corporate media has not covered this in significant detail. And my being here hopefully will help cut through that and get the message out that these people are standing up for you, and that matters.
Senator, will you support DeSantis over Trump in 2024 if he continues to promote Operation Warp Speed as a success when we know the vaccines are causing myocarditis?
Look, I'm going to stay out of politics right now. I'm focused on the issue at hand, which is the mandates that are wrong and defending people's liberty.
You should run for president.
Thank you.
What are you going to do to get Democrats on board with ending the emergency declaration?
Look, what it's going to take is hearing from their constituents. What it's going to take right now, Democrats are more scared of their left wing, and they're more scared of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer than they are the men and women they represent. And what it's going to take when they come home is hearing from their constituents, enough is enough. And at the end of the day, look, our democratic system works on accountability. One of the great things they say in the People's Convoy is that we work for the people.
I want to add something to what he's saying. First and foremost, the People's Convoy is not representative of the right or the left. It's representative of the people of the United States. Doesn't matter which side of the aisle you lean on. This is for everyone. This is for your personal freedoms. That's what this is about. And it's time to remind the American government, and governments truly around the world even, that they work for us. And now is the time for the American people around the country, for the people around the world, to stand up for your personal freedoms, for what some would call your God-given rights. Now is the time. And I encourage truck drivers from around the world to stand up.
Given the Biden administration's ban on Russian oil imports, will rising gas prices have any effect on the people's convoy?
No,
Why?
because we're sitting in Hagerstown doing one loop around the Beltway at this time. And if it continues to rise, we'll find a permanent location to sit with permits.
Senator, do you think the truckers should come into D.C. like they did in Ottawa?
Look, I think that's a choice for them to make. I understand there's some truckers that are concerned that they would face persecution. I don't know if that would happen or not from the D.C. government. I'm certainly concerned about the willingness of politicians to abuse their power. And I think what happened in Ottawa was disgraceful. We've seen a pattern over and over again of politicians abusing power to silence views they don't like. And so I understand their concerns. I'm not going to presume to give them advice on how to handle that, but I did think it was important for us to come and bring this was the lead rig in the convoy this morning. And so we started in the convoy and then we detoured to come down here to bring the voice of the truckers here to our nation's capital. Bring the voice of the truckers here to our nation's capital.
Sir in the red, can we get your name?
Me?
Yeah.
Brian Brazzi, co-organizer of the People's Convoy. You also have Mike Landis here, co-organizer. Marcus Summers and Jerry Stetz, and many others that have been involved in this process. We also have one of the doctors with us that stands behind us with science.
How do you spell your last name?
Brase.
And by the way, I can testify he's one hell of a truck driver, because these curvy roads in D.C., they asked tongue-in-cheek if I wanted to drive the rig. I said, yeah, let's not kill anybody. Let's not put me behind the wheel.
And I wanted to say something here that Senator Cruz said and Brian. It's a very big distinction we've seen now between Canada and the United States, and it demonstrates why the United States remains the beacon of hope in this world. Because the Prime Minister of Canada, instead of sitting down with the truckers after 3 weeks, peaceful protest, he decided to move them out with brute force. It is this country, the United States, is showing. The Canadian truckers started it and we need to praise them. But the United States trucker is going to finish it. But the United States has shown the Prime Minister of Canada what a statesman and a leader should have done. Like Senator Cruz, like Senator Johnson. Sit down, listen to what the issues are, and have a discussion and a negotiation.
Senator, do you see any parallels between this and the Tea Party demonstrations several years ago?
I actually think there's a lot of similarities between the two. That they both arose as movements from the people. They both arose as frustration with arbitrary government power in Washington, and they were organic. That's part of what made it so powerful. You know, the Tea Party, and look, I got elected. I rose up through the Tea Party and got sent to the Senate from Texas with the support of a lot of the Tea Party. You know, when the Tea Party would gather, that they would clean the place they were at and leave it better than when they arrived. One of the things that struck me meeting with the leaders of the People's Convoy is so much of the corporate media is mischaracterizing what they're doing, and they're trying to paint these truck drivers as violent criminals. And that's just a flat-out lie. It is not, in fact, what they're doing. They're not engaged in acts of violence. And one of the things that struck me when I sat down with them earlier this week, and they were talking about as they were coming from California across the country, and more people were joining them as they crossed the country, is that when they would stop for the night and sleep, that they made a point of saying, okay, pick up everything, don't leave any trash, don't even leave cigarette butts. Pick up your cigarette butts and clean it up when you're leaving. That is the definition of being responsible. And what these men and women are doing, and by the way, there are a lot of women out there driving trucks too. It wasn't just men. What these men and women are doing is they're exercising their First Amendment right. The Constitution protects free speech, and it protects the right to peaceful protest. And so they're complying with the laws. You know, it's striking. They're in communications with the police in Virginia and Maryland and DC, letting them know what they're going to do, literally down to what time the convoy will start, what entrance to the freeway they're going to take, what exit they're going to take, so that law enforcement can know and be there. This is peaceful protest, and everyone in the corporate media who's trying to characterize it otherwise is not being honest with the public.
And to add a quick note to that, as it might have been the truckers that have stood up in Canada that started this whole thing, here in the United States, truck drivers are standing up, but this isn't a trucking convoy. This is the people's convoy. We got motorhomes, campers, motorcycles, cars. We got people from all across the country, from Adelanto, California to Hagerstown, Maryland, that have joined in. Thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, and I'll go as far as saying millions of people have lined the freeways across this country and over top of the overpasses to rally in support of us. This is truly the people's convoy. This is a movement by the people and for the people, 100%. Everybody is represented, from liberals to conservatives, from gay and straight, from male and female, from every race and every religion. You will find it in the people's convoy.
Well, and Brian, tell folks about the flag that is on that truck
I'm
behind us.
definitely not the one to tell that story.
Mike.
That's Mike.
All right. Mike. Driven across the country.
Yeah, so
Here, come in front of the mics.
we've had quite a lot of experiences coming across the country so far, and I was fortunate to lead it from California to here. You know, the big basis behind this is representative of what that flag on my truck stands for, and that's the Constitution. Every man and woman that's ever fought under that flag has taken an oath to defend the Constitution to foreign and domestic enemies. The unfortunate part is when they're domestic and they're their boss, they really can't do anything about it. What I mean by that is we've talked to these doctors. Nobody's ever had to die from this. No one's saying it never was real, but nobody had to die. There was ways to treat this without anybody perishing. And the unfortunate part with that is we've ended up with these emergency declarations that have kind of null and void that Constitution if they chose to do so. With that being said, in our Constitution, we not only have the right, but basically the duty as the American people to stop a tyrannical government. I think when a representative of the government, such as Dr. Fauci, is making monetary gains off medicines that were made to use when there was other ones available before that, and people have perished from it, there's a problem. That flag was given to me by the grandson of a World War II veteran in Big Cabin, Oklahoma. That man died in a tank in Germany in World War II. That particular flag came back on his casket. This fellow's mom is 78 years old, is a daughter of that fallen soldier. And he drove that flag to me and handed it to me folded, in which it had been for over 70 years, because his mom wanted it to fly behind my truck because it was the first thing since World War II to her that represented freedom.
Wow.
And I cried when he handed it to me, because that is about the heaviest thing I ever carried in my arms, other than my kids. And we've flown it proudly. The only thing they asked is that no matter how tattered it gets returned when we're done. And I will deliver that flag back to this family in Texas when this is all over. And I promised them that it would come to Washington, D.C. And there it sits.
Mission accomplished.
So what we're asking for with that, so that nobody that died under that flag has to be done so in vain, that we want accountability for anyone that had any part in making this pandemic worse than it had to be.
Right.
Yes.
Because it's no different than someone going out on the street and hurting someone that way.
That's right.
There needs to be accountability, and they need to pay for what they've done.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, final question. Okay, we're good. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.